Hey there, welcome to this week's YouTube episode of the Her Retirement YouTube series. I am Lynn, and today we are talking about the surprising benefits of planning future you. And I just recorded a podcast about this, but I thought it was such an important topic that I wanted to jump here and do a video. It's going to be about 25 minutes, so sit down, relax, take a listen, and learn some surprising benefits of planning future you. This year, I started to really think about this idea and visualize my future me. And because I'm 56, almost 57 in August, my future will more than likely bring some pretty significant lifestyle changes. But I'm only going to bite off a little bit at a time of my future me planning, because I don't want to get overwhelmed. And I'm going to kind of visualize, let's say, the next 10 years and what that path to the future looks like for me. And I wasn't sure that I was going to do this recording of the podcast or the video, but this week, but I was spurred on by an article I read recently on the BBC website entitled "How Thinking About Future You Can Build a Happier Life." And that really caught my attention because I'm all about health, wealth, and happiness at Her Retirement. And then yesterday, I took my mom to a local senior center for some future planning for her. And it actually ended up being advantageous to me. But she wanted to get some advice on Medicare. She's a retired teacher, and I know basics of Medicare, but not specifically for teachers. And so she met with a Shine counselor. So here in Massachusetts, Shine counselors provide free Medicare advice and other elder planning. And she gave us the name of an elder care or elder planning lawyer, which was really helpful. And we talked a little bit about that and some of my mom's wishes. And I decided this week would be as good as any to, what I like to say, get her done. So helping my 86-year-old mom put a plan in place for her future definitely spurred me on to come home and do some of my own visualizing, planning, and recording of my podcast and this video. And then I circled back to David Robson's BBC article, and I'm looking forward to sharing some of his insights from the article with you, along with some of my tips for visually mapping out your future. And with this episode, I've decided to start assigning some homework assignments to you because, I believe that's the only way to make change is to take action. Okay. And so I think homework really helps listeners and viewers not just listen or watch and then just go back to your lives and go on about normal business, but it forces you actually to take action when you hold yourself accountable to doing the homework, because that's the only way to make a change is to take action, and only way to change your present and your future. And we need to do that in some cases. So at the end of this recording, I'm going to explain your assignment and, just go over the details and help you get her done also. So Mr. Robson's article encourages people to imagine and nurture their future self, including their health, their wealth, and their happiness, which I love the concept of it, because health, wealth, and happiness is the focus not only of my podcast and my YouTube channel, but also my entire Her Retirement platform at herretirement.com. And the author, Mr. Robson, asks readers to think ahead to 10 years from now and consider if you'll still fundamentally be the person you are today, or will you hardly recognize yourself, or are you really even connected to your future self? So many people, as you'll find out, really aren't. Many researchers and psychological studies show that people's responses to this question varies a lot, but their answer does point to some really surprising behavioral tendencies, and it gives us some benefits that we can reap if we connect with our future self. Those who have a strong sense of who they are and will become in the future tend to be better and more responsible with their money, which is really important to us at Her Retirement, how they treat others, and how being mindful of actions will really make their future easier. By contrast, some people who have difficulty imagining their futures or their future selves as just an extension of their current self, they appear to be somewhat disconnected from their present day identity and they tend to act less responsibly in their actions. Okay. The article goes on to say that nurturing your future self is just another thing we should all be mindful of, a very important thing. Getting to know our future self and encouraging acceptance of who we will become will have a significant impact and significant benefits for our financial security and health and happiness. So this sounds good to me. How about you? But guess what? This recent research is based on writings from the 18th century, and they're philosophers of Joseph Butler and Derek Parfit. In 1736, Butler offers this insight to us, and I quote, "If the self or person of today and that of tomorrow are not the same, but only like persons, the person of today is really no more interested in what will befall the person of tomorrow than in what will befall any other person." This theory was later expanded by Derek Parfit and used as a basis by a professor of behavioral decision-making, marketing, and psychology at the University of California, Los Angeles, and his name was Hal Hershfield, or is Hal Hershfield. Mr. Hershfield hypothesized that a disconnection from our future selves might explain many irrational elements of human behavior, including our reluctance to set aside savings for retirement. That's pretty interesting, right? We may blame a lot of things on our inability to save for retirement. And of course, there are some legit reasons. I have my own, right? They might be seen as excuses, but there's things out of our control, things in our control, and they do happen. But how often do we consider how our own behavior plays into our outcomes? Probably not as often as we should. The article goes into more detail on Hershfield's research and how he conducted it through conversations with research participants about future self. He also asked participants to consider various financial planning scenarios, such as one in which a person could either receive a smaller reward soon or a larger reward in the future. What would you do? As one might expect, those who felt more connection to their future self were much more willing to delay instant gratification and wait for the bigger reward. As I'm talking about this, I'm wondering how much of this behavior comes down to the people who believe in the motto, live for today, or you can't take it with you, so, spend it today. Do those people just tend to focus on current me? Hershfield went on to find out how this tendency correlated with actual financial planning of these participants. So it's one thing to think about it, but what did they actually do? Well, guess what? He discovered those more in touch with future self had more money saved, and those monies were off limit to current self. Next, as the article says, Back to the Future. By the way, I really love that movie. In fact, Marty says, "Wait a minute, Doc, are you telling me you built a time machine out of a DeLorean?" Sorry, I digress. I just love movies and I love quotes, and I always make some kind of connection to something happening in real life. But sorry for my digression. Back to the Future. Later research by Hershfield examined other areas of life, and here's what he found out. Number one, people's future self-continuity could predict their exercise, behaviors, and overall fitness. What? Shut the front door. I can't believe it, because I'm all about health and fitness. With a strong connection to your future self, you're more likely to take care of your health and your fitness now and into the future. Research proves it. Get moving. Number two, people who score highly on future self-continuity measures have higher moral standards than those who struggle to identify with their future selves. These people understand the consequences of present-day decisions and their impact on future self. And number three, future self-continuity at the beginning of Hershfield's study, which lasted over a decade with about 4,000 participants, could predict their life satisfaction 10 years later. Amazing stuff. People who set up their lives in a way that benefits future self, in addition to current self, do enjoy health, wealth, and happiness. More health, wealth, and happiness. Inability to identify with future self can have long-term consequences and for overall well-being. And you know what? We all struggle sometimes to imagine ourselves older, right? Like, oh boy, what am I going to look like with more wrinkles, and how am I going to move, and how am I going to feel, and am I going to be healthy, and will I be wealthy, and will I be happy? But I noticed in my 30s and 40s that I wasn't so much bothered thinking about 10 years into the future. But now in my mid 50s, once in a while, there's a little panic, a little worry sets in, wondering what it's going to be like to be that age, the age where I thought my grandparents were old. But they say 50, 60 is the new 40, 50, maybe something like that. Anyway, it doesn't stop me from keeping a clear picture in my head of the future. And it's a good picture. So I encourage you, visualize, think about future self, connect with future self. Don't let it scare you or bother you. Good stuff is in the future. This extremely interesting article and research really wraps up a section with what is called the things I wish I'd known, right? That's a really powerful statement. Things I wish I'd known. Younger people are always asking older people, what is it that you wish you knew? This reminds me of a piece from Irma Bombeck's book, Eat Less Cottage Cheese and More Ice Cream, Thoughts on Life from Irma Bombeck. And in that was a piece, If I Had to Live My Life Over Again. And I remember reading it as either a preteen or teenager. And then I read it again just before I became a parent, because it had such a profound impact on how I managed my life, as a parent. And, I guess that was Irma Bombeck's intention, right? I'm going to read that at the end of this video, just to remind you all of what she says, because they are very sage words of advice. But so what are some things in the article, things I wish I'd known? Well, what the author says, based on all the benefits of connecting with and planning future you, including health, wealth, and happiness, we of course want to know, how can we do this? Okay, sounds great. I believe it. The research, proves it. But how can I do this? And this is where your homework comes for this episode. Based on all the information that you have, Hirschfield's research says that one of the ways that you can do this, okay, in addition to, practicing what he found out, right, with connecting with your future self, one of the ways you can do this is to create an avatar of what you might look like at, say, age 70. People who did this, believe it or not, people who did this reported feeling a greater connection to their future self. And in subsequent measures of decision-making, they showed more financial responsibility, like setting aside more money for retirement. So I just need to get all of our clients and people that I talk to create an avatar, and then they're going to save more money for retirement. Problem solved. Does this surprise you? Well, it kind of surprised me, but I'm going to create my avatar. And according to the author of the article, David Robson, these exercises, quote, encourage people to feel a greater sense of connection with their future self. And as a result, it primes them for positive behavioral change, end quote. So next, another way, a less techie way to accomplish the connection is to write a letter to future you, say 10 to 20 years from now. Include what's important for you now and what you hope to accomplish in the coming decade or decades of life. I have done something similar with vision boards, and I have a journal where I write down my intentions for the future. And in my Her Retirement Readiness software platform, I have a module called Envision. And in that module, you go through a number of exercises, either on your own or with your spouse or partner, to help you think about your future and what are your priorities. It's really good for prioritizing what your lifestyle priorities are and how you want to live your life, and all kinds of different prompts to help you envision that future for yourself. But I'm pretty excited about writing this letter, because I am a letter writer. I love the practice of writing with penmanship, the lost art of penmanship. And I have written a letter to my kids, future, for them to read when I pass someday. But I'm going to write this letter. I think that will be fun. Hirschfield studies have shown that the task of writing this letter increased the amount of time that people spent exercising. So there's a connection there, right? Write the letter, future self. Then you say, oh, I need to be healthier. Let's start exercising. And it really started, snowballing over the course of a week after writing this letter. I know it's crazy. It's a sign that these people had started to take their long-term health seriously when they wrote a letter to their future self, because, you want your future self to be around to read the letter. If you're keen to try this, he says or suggests that you could amplify the effects of writing the letter by writing a reply from future you. So you're going to write to future you, and future you is going to write a reply, since this will force you to adopt a long-term perspective. Now, if you're wondering how Hirschfield has applied his research to his own life, the author shares with us that he tries to put himself in the shoes of his future self to imagine how he might look back on his current behavior in certain circumstances, maybe when he's having some negative feelings or displaying negative behavior. He uses this technique when he's faced with stressful situations like raising his children, and I've got 3, so I know that there's been those stressful times. He states, and I quote, "I try to think whether my future self would be proud of the way that I handled myself." And it's kind of interesting because my mother used to say that, like, what would future you, like when you're older, what would you think about this? And I used to tell my kids, like, again, I sounded like my mother, but what would you think about this in the future if you looked back and said you did this? Would you be proud? So I think it's really good to be able to do that with your mind, is put yourself in that future position. Now, Mr. Robson in the article adds, quote, "It might seem eccentric to start a conversation with an imaginary, entity." Well, it's kind of not, it's you, but it's future you. But once your future self becomes alive in your mind, you may find it much easier to make the small personal sacrifices that are essential to preserving your well-being. And that's what it's all about. We have to make those choices, make those sacrifices, prioritize to make life better for future you. Okay. And in the years ahead, you'll thank yourself for the forethought. Well, you know what? You actually don't have to wait until the future to thank yourself. You can thank yourself in the letter that you're going to write to yourself. Now, that's the power of positive suggestion. But David Robson, I keep wanting to call him Robson. David Robson is a science writer and author based in London, England. His latest book, The Expectation Effect: How Your Mindset Can Transform Your Life, was just published in January of this year. So you might want to grab that book. And if you want to check it out, I think head over to Amazon. I think that's where a lot of people go. Maybe the local library will have a copy. I think I'm going to grab it. And I also want to mention another book I heard about in another podcast on this topic called Be Your Future Self Now, which is totally apropos. And it's The Science of Intentional Transformation by Benjamin Hardy. And I love intentional transformation. We talk about being intentional with her retirement. You can live a better, more financially secure and happier life, more intentional life, by committing to education, right? And that's what this video series that I do on YouTube is all about. It's what my podcast is all about. It's all about knowing more and having more. His book is coming out in June. Benjamin Hardy's book is coming out in June. And the description on Amazon says, and I quote, "This isn't a book about becoming, it's about being." Noted psychologist Dr. Benjamin Hardy shows how to imagine the person you want to be, then be that person now, today. When you do this, your imagined future directs your behavior rather than your past. So let your future affect your behavior, not your past. That's pretty powerful, because so often we kind of dwell on the past. And, it's okay to use some of your learnings from your past to power your present and your future, but not all that negative stuff. Like, leave it in the past. Look forward to the future. The future hasn't been written yet. So it can be anything, right? You can imagine anything. Who is your future self? That question may seem trite as the description of the book goes on, but it's literally the answer to all of life's questions. It's the answer to what you're going to do today. It's the answer to how motivated you are and how you feel about yourself. It's the answer to whether you'll distract yourself on social media for hours. I've been guilty of that also on Facebook Marketplace, but I did that for a good cause because I was trying to save money on new furniture, and I saved oodles and oodles. That's for another video, another podcast. But also whether you'll eat junk food and what time you'll get up in the morning. So many things. Your imagined future self is the driver of your current reality. It is up to you to develop the ability to imagine better and more expansive visions of your future self. Your current view of your future self is very limited. If you seek learning, growth, and new experiences, you'll be able to imagine a different and better future self than you currently can. Cool stuff. It's not only useful to see your future self as a different person from who you are today, but it's also completely accurate. Your future self will not be the same person you are today. They will see the world differently. They'll have had experiences, challenges, and growth you currently don't have. They'll have different goals and priorities. They'll have different habits. They'll also be in a completely different world, a world with different cultural values, different technologies, and different challenges. So as I close out this YouTube video, I want to remind you about a few things. There are many benefits to connecting with and planning future you, including more health, wealth, and happiness today and in the future. And as you're doing this, remember, when you're evaluating or dreaming about future you, go into every aspect of your life and think about how you'd like to feel and what you envision. And here's a list of some of the areas that I want you to think about: home, friendships, romantic relationships, family, career, travel, car, your transportation needs, health, community, hobbies, fashion, contribution, connection, your health and well-being, like fitness, nutrition, and your financial foundation is so important. And finally, I'd like to share with you what Irma Bombeck said to the question, if I had to live my life over again, would I change anything? You may have heard this, but it's really good. I used to have actually pinned up on a bulletin board. We recently moved. I don't have my board anymore, but I have to do a new one. Her answer to that question was no, but then she thought about it and she changed her mind. And here's what she said. And I want to remember that I read this a couple of times throughout my life. And right before I had children or right after I had my first child, it really, really impacted how I was as a parent, because I don't know how true some of these things are, regrets, if you will, things she would have done differently. But I didn't want to have these, especially as it related to my children. So if I had to live my life over again, I would have waxed less and listened more. Instead of wishing away 9 months of pregnancy and complaining about the shadow over my feet, I'd have cherished every minute of it and realized that the wonderment growing inside of me was to be my only chance in life to assist God in a miracle. And just as a side note, I remember reading this. And so I kept a journal, and I kept a journal of all my feelings and really, really lived in the moments of my 2 pregnancies, which resulted in 3 children. But I really, really wanted to remember this time in my life and really appreciate the incredible miracle of life and birth that it is. I would have never insisted the car windows be rolled up on a summer day because my hair had just been teased and sprayed. Well, I ended up getting a convertible and never worried about my hair. I would have invited friends over to dinner, even if the carpet was stained and the sofa faded, and I had a solution for that too. I would have eaten popcorn in the good living room and worried less about the dirt when you lit the fireplace. I would have taken the time to listen to my grandfather ramble about his youth. And now I'm listening. I've listened to my grandmother. I'm writing a book about her ramblings. I listened to my mom ramble about her life. It's so good for you. I would have burnt the pink candle that sculpted like a rose before it melted while being stored. I would have sat cross-legged on the lawn with my children and never worried about grass stains. I would have cried and laughed less while watching television and more while watching real life. I would have shared more of the responsibility carried by my husband, which I took for granted. I would have eaten less cottage cheese and more ice cream. I would have gone to bed when I was sick instead of pretending the earth would go into a holding pattern if I weren't there for a day. I would never have bought anything just because it was practical or wouldn't show soil or guaranteed to last a lifetime. When my child kissed me impetuously, I would never have said later, now go get washed up for dinner. There would have been more I love yous, more I'm sorries, more I'm listenings, but mostly given another shot at life, I would seize every minute of it. Look at it and really see it. Try it on, live it, exhaust it, and never give that minute back until there was nothing left of it. Wow, powerful words, worth listening to, reading over and over again throughout your life. It really puts things in perspective. That wraps up this week's episode. I hope you found it as interesting as I did. I have some homework I need to do. Don't forget to do your homework, create your avatar, write a letter to your future self. Feel free to share either or both with me at lynnt@herretirement.com. I am here to help you, whether it is related to health, wealth, or happiness. I have a network of experts that I can connect you to for any of those resources. We do coaching at Her Retirement. We do lots of educational programming, lots of free and paid education programs to help you know more and have more. Here's to knowing more and having more, speaking of, and to getting her done.